We've got some great questions today. The main question is on the toxic elements of whiskey distillation. Thanks for joining us today on Questions and Answers. So before I get started with the questions and answers, I really wanted to reach out and thank everyone who commented on the last Thursday's episode where I talked about the sort of the modern politics affecting our channel. That was intense dealing with all those comments, and I really I've read through almost every single comment, and there are thousands of comments. They're very, very encouraging, so I really want to thank everyone for reaching out and all the encouragement, all the support that you give us through those comments. It means a lot and it's very, very helpful. So thank you really so much for that. So here is the first question, and this one came in on the dairy episode that we did down at Historic Locust Grove down in Louisville, Kentucky. And the question is, so am I right in assuming the availability of milk was really more seasonal than it is today? Most of the milk coming around the calving season, and it was very limited in the winter. I think that's a very, very good assumption that milk was a lot more seasonal than it is today. They work really hard at making sure the milk supplies today are very consistent throughout the year. A lot of those cows being confined inside of buildings with lighting, and so and they make sure that that the whole process is happening continuously instead of like it would have happened in the 18th century with most of the calves being born at a very particular time of the year and then the cows drying up later on in the season. So I think it's a really good assumption that would be happening in the 18th century. Here's a question. Actually, I think it's by the same commenter. This one came in on the ice cream episode. And the question is, she says to churn for 10 minutes and then to let it set for 3 minutes. Would you have clocks in the kitchen to measure that, or would you just repeat a prayer so many times? I suppose this is a prosperous household, so it is not impossible that they would have multiple clocks or watches, but a lot of people would not. I don't have an answer, but timekeeping in the past would be a good video to think about. Well, we've had the clock kind of question multiple times, whether it has to do with the amount of time that something would be sort of cooking, or in this case, processing the ice cream. And the answer that we've given in the past has to do with the idea that most of the cookbooks aren't specific. They aren't specific in their amounts, and they're not terribly specific in their times because of issues like this. Would a standard household have a timepiece? How would they have used it? And because the recipes are more of sort of by feel or by idea, they aren't specific. And so really you do have to sort of play these things by ear. The 3 minutes, the 10 minutes, those are just judgments by that particular cook about how long it takes. So you would just do this in your head. You would just, well, that feels about right. Normally the timing doesn't have to be that terribly precise. Usually you're cooking by consistency, and even in this ice cream setting, you would just get a feel for that depending on how this is thickening up. Maybe I'm going to wait less or more time. So I don't think the cooks in the time period, number one, they didn't have thermometers. They didn't know what was going on with temperature, and you could probably guess that they didn't really have a precision time thing going on here either. Here's another one that came in on this last episode. This episode's got me wondering, how would restaurants have worked in the 18th century, and did they even have proper restaurants, or was it just soup and bread at the tavern? It's a big question, and it's a really, really interesting one. There's multiple questions that that have related to this in the past, and I'm a little torn about exactly how to answer this. We were at the AlFam conference really recently, a couple of weeks ago, at Genesee Country Village, and there was actually a 90-minute session that somebody from Old Sturbridge Village put on about taverns, tavern food, tavern drinks. Such a great session to set in on, and they had some really, really interesting insights. And one of them was about this idea, this question about restaurants in the 18th century and early 19th century. And that particular person was pointing out the modern concept of a restaurant, at least in North America, really does not happen until, what was it, the 1830s or 40s? Yeah, so like the 1830s or 40s happening, I think it was in New York City. So before that, our idea of a restaurant just really isn't happening in the 18th century, at least in the northern colonies area. They had taverns, certainly, but the food that was served at the tavern was whatever was on tap at the time, and that may have been very, very, very simple fare. So you didn't necessarily go and order whatever. You went and you ate what they had to offer you, and that may have been something not necessarily terribly palatable, many times eaten in a very, very common setting, so everyone eating out of the same bowl, and it sounded like many times it was very simple fare that we would not consider restaurant food at all. But it's a very, very deep topic, and it's a tricky one to answer unless you can get very, very specific, and then you've got to find the answer to that. It's a big question. And here's another one of these really big questions. Hi, James. Can you tell me why German and Scottish cooking involves a lot of deep frying, while in French or Spanish cultures it is not? I'm not sure if I'm right, but I'm generalizing. Well, that's the deal. Okay, this is a giant question because it's very, very generalized. And we can look at some of these things and try to answer them, but I would hate to answer this question because there are many different things going on within, say, this says German and Scottish or French cooking or Spanish cooking. There are all these different regions in Germany, in France, in Spain, and they all have varying cooking styles and things that might be popular. That's true today, so much more true in the 18th and 19th century. So it is too much. I would hate to want to generalize and say this is true because it may not necessarily be true at all for different regions at different times. So yeah, generalizing is really, really hard to answer a question like this. It's really a very big question, and if I wanted to answer it properly, I'd probably need a 10-volume set of books to do it. So I don't even want to step foot into a question like this because I know I'm going to be wrong. So here's the main question today. This had to do with the early American whiskey episode that we did, again, down at Historic Locust Grove in Louisville, Kentucky. And make sure to check out this video because it's a real fun one. We were working with Brian Cushing there, and he went through the whole process. They've just put together a new distilling program down there, and he mentioned heads, hearts, and tails, having to do with what's going on with the distilling process and the fact that you just don't take everything that comes out of the still and you use it as a actual human consumption type of drink, right? So here's the question. I'm curious, what is the toxic stuff in the heads and tails? A small amount of methanol by any chance, or some other stuff? Well, the very first stuff that comes out of, now again, I'm not the super expert on this. I know a lot of people will probably chime into the comment section, so make sure to check out the comment section because a lot of people will have a lot to say about this particular topic. But the first part that comes out of the distilling process definitely has methanol in it, and it has some other toxic parts and components that just make it distasteful. Wood esters or esters and other kinds of components in that are coming off that first bit of distillation that you really don't want. You may even have, things that are inside the worm, the cooling coil, and other issues as it first starts to perk through, and you do not want to. It's toxic. You don't want to drink it. And at the very tail end of the distilling process, you start to get some of those esters again and some other parts of the process that may not be tasteful. Definitely not necessarily as much toxic in the tail end, but certainly not as potent and not as good tasting. So you wouldn't necessarily discard the distillate that came at the very beginning, at the very end, but you wouldn't consume it. You would actually probably take it, put it into the next batch. And really, the art of distilling is knowing just how much of the heads and the tails that you keep, and just where this middle part is, the good part of the distillation is, and where the bad part is. That's some of the true art of knowing what's going on with your distillation process. And so much of the higher class distillation, you would actually take even the middle part and redistill it, send it back through the system, and continue to get the very best out of that distillation process. Yes, and even that idea sometimes you see on the old jugs, the 1x, 2x, 3x, you'll even see that in cartoons. That has to do with how many times this distillate has gone through the still process. So if it's gone through 2 times, it's got 2 X's. If it's gone through 3 times, it's gone 3 X's. Of course, I'm sure some people might, mislabel it and say this is wonderful stuff when it's not. But that being said, again, one of these really deep subjects. There's a lot to this, but it's one that really is a quite common thing that's happening in the 18th century that almost anybody in the time period would at least be familiar with. A couple of quick shout outs. I wanted to say hi to Kevin and all those folks in the No Fear computer class. Apparently you guys are having a lot of fun watching the channel, so thanks for the message on that. And a quick message to one person in particular, Samantha Weber. You wrote something to Ivy. She's lost your address and she wants to write you back, so try to get your address to us some way or another so that Ivy can write you back. Whew, a lot of great questions, a lot of comments to go through. I really want to thank everyone for the amazing outpouring of support that's coming in the last week. We've got a lot of views. Everybody was interested in what was going on with the Orange Fool episode, so a lot of people have watched that episode, and I really want to thank everyone for their amazing outpouring of support for what we do. It is tremendous to watch that, and that support isn't just for me. When you go and you comment on the channel, a lot of people are reading that comment. So I want to thank everyone for participating in the community that's going down in the comment section. It is a very, very important part of what we're doing here. You're part of that. It's not just me. You're helping out. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your amazing support. Continue to comment on the channel. I do my very best to read everything that comes through. I really enjoy going through that, so thank you so much for that. And I want to thank you today for watching.